Hancock Financial Services. Real life, real answers. By Sears Craftsman, people who depend on tools depend on Craftsman. By Adidas Torsion, created with one thing in mind, winning. And by Mercedes-Benz, automotive sponsor of the New York City Marathon. Once again, here's Jim McKay.
One of the more inspiring developments of the New York City Marathon has been the growth of a group called the Achilles Track Club. We'll talk about them in a moment, but first, let's take a look here in Central Park. The skating rink is open and they are skating, prospective Olympic champions perhaps. Don't have to practice the school figures anymore because they're taking those out of the international competition in the Olympics. You know that, Marty? They didn't, most of the skaters didn't like them anyway.
No.
You know, the little figure eights and that sort of thing. But it's a nice day in New York. Achilles Track Club, I was talking about, started with 3 members in 1982 by Dick Traum, who was an amputee himself. They now have more than 1,000 members, 35 chapters worldwide, including the Soviet Union, Poland, Australia, many other countries. Now, they start at different times according to their handicaps. There are blind runners, amputees, stroke victims, those with multiple sclerosis, cerebral palsy, even mental retardation, all participating, trying to finish the course. Caring. And one of the most touching stories in the Achilles Track Club, an inspiring story truly, that you'll find right now, is a man named Cyril Charles.
Cyril Charles is 26 years old. At the age of 9, he began to lose his vision from a disease of the corneas. By 12, he could see only movement and color, but Cyril survived. He taught himself to play the piano. He ran track for the School for the Blind in his homeland of Trinidad and broke school records in every distance. And then he took on the challenge of the New York City Marathon, completing his first race 2 years ago with a guide. The Achilles Track Club, a team of runners with all types of disabilities, invited him back to run in 1988. And then in January of this year, the Achilles Track Club made a miracle happen. They paid for a cornea transplant, and all of a sudden, Cyril Charles could see.
It's like being born again. Everything is new. Everything that I've taught, the way it used to be, is different. Colors seem much brighter. It's a whole new game. It's a whole new life living. It's great.
This year, Cyril Charles is running the New York City Marathon again, except now he is the guide for blind runner Matt Denson.
Because I'm really a middle distance.
Cyril is the best guide I've ever run with so far, and I think the reason for that is probably because he can sympathize with exactly what I'm going through.
While they run, Cyril and Matt hold a strap that allows Cyril to guide Matt away from curves and around potholes. They're together. Their pace matches. Their finish time will be the same. And they run step for step as one person, free in the streets of New York.
And there they are. Matt Denson, by the way, is a junior studying special education at Glassboro College in New Jersey. He lost his sight at age 12 due to a brain tumor. Before his surgery, he played all kinds of sports. Started running just 2 years ago, and he says it changed his life. Last year, he used up 4 different guides before crossing the finish line. At one point, he had run out of guides, and at a watering stop, he yelled out, "Who wants to run with a blind runner?" Someone did. One story of the 24,000 stories in the New York City Marathon of 1989. So there they are. What's going on up front? What's going on with the elite class runners? Well, let's take a look. And
well, Jame Ikanga has assumed the lead, as many people felt he would. That's Simon Rashani of Tanzania, number 18 in second. And what a surprise in third. Ken Martin, number 24, an American, who recently ran his best 10K time is back, I guess, in top form. He has to be just to even run the first part of this race with them. Mark Nenow, the American in the white uniform, is just behind him. Valene D'Ensimo has joined the first pack again. He's number 2, just behind Ken Martin, and just behind him is Steve Jones, the defending champion.
Ken Martin is 31 years old. He's done a 2:11:23 marathon. He's from Santa Fe, New Mexico. And on the other side of 4th Avenue in Brooklyn, the women's race. And the women's race is one woman at the moment, Ingrid Christensen of Norway, mother of a little boy. She's never won New York City's marathon. Ivanova still second, and Margaret Gross of the United States still in 3rd position. And there she is, just behind.
Margaret is number 10, just behind here. Her F3 is Laura Foley, who has run here for the last 7 races and been in the top 4 each time. So, you know they're running a good pace.
Catherine Switzer.
Yes, Jim, I'm down here right beside Margaret Gross and Laura Foley. Margaret, of course, in 3rd, Laura Foley in 4th, trailing her. She is letting Margaret do all the work here. It's very, very smart running. And Laura is certainly a smart runner, having finished here in the top 4 7 times. But look a little bit back behind them if you can. And I'm seeing not but 20 yards behind them is Priscilla Welch, who won this race here in 1987. Now, Priscilla is going to be 45 in 3 weeks. She's in the best shape of her life, having done 18 solid weeks of good training. Don't count her out. She's a come-from-behind runner. She could really pull up to these others and take a place here today.
So they're literally of all ages. She's almost 45. Earlier, if you weren't with us, we met 3 men who are in this race who are over 90 years of age.
What a race that is going to be. But just in a few moments, when they merge at the 8-mile mark, then they will be running along with the men, and it's going to hurt a little bit. Priscilla Welch really needs to try and get up right with them so she doesn't lose them in the crowd after they make that merging at 8 miles. But what great racing there'll be for the 3rd place.
We talked to Margaret Gross a little bit earlier. Our question for her was how she would react in the present circumstance if Ingrid Christensen goes out early.
Bye-bye. She can just go. She'll probably go through the 10K in my PR. I think the race is for 2nd. Everybody knows that. And, of course, we'll be looking for Ingrid around 20 if she has a bad day. But I think that hopefully we'll have a pack of runners that'll be running 2:28, 2:27 pace. And you know, that's the way I like it. Just have people drop off and run a nice, steady pace.
So she has said bye-bye to Ingrid Christensen. See you around somewhere. But 2nd place in this one would be a great achievement for Margaret Gross. Foley, however, is still dogging her footsteps. A watering stop, a quick one. A small refreshment. You've got a long way to go. Bill Conti, the 52 members of the Juilliard Orchestra, all young people, students at the Juilliard School. Later today on ABC Sports, by the way, 10 of golf's top players tee it up for $250,000 in prize money at the Merrill Lynch Shootout. Jack Nicklaus, Payne Stewart, PGA Player of the Year Tom Kite, and others will meet in this unique shot-making competition beginning at 4 Eastern, 3 Central and Pacific today on ABC Sports. Saw Manhattan in the background, and now again down to 4th Avenue, that long, long road. They've reached mile 10 now. And Ingrid Christensen has joined the male runners now. As you pointed out, Marty, she has to thread her way through now. It's a little bit different, like a race car caught in traffic.
Well, this is a very smart move, especially at New York. If a woman can get a big lead in the first 8 miles, when they merge, now the women behind her can't get her in their line of sight. And if you don't see somebody, you certainly lose motivation. So like Greta Weitz, who won this race 9 times before her, partly by going out fast and getting a nice lead before the 8-mile mark, Ingrid has done the same thing here, and it's going to make it much harder. Even if the women behind her have the running in them, they've got to thread their way through the men.
Incidentally, no more amateurs except the recreational runners here. Big prize money in this event, more than $26,000 first prize in both the men's and the women's division and the Mercedes. And quite a number of the runners being paid large sums of money simply to run here by their sponsors, the biggest one, John Hancock.
Well, we should mention, why is the New York City Marathon this year so much better than other marathons in the past? And it really started about 2 years ago when John Hancock got involved in sponsoring the Boston Marathon and then LA and New York, and they really have a number of the world's top marathoners under contract to do clinics to youth in high schools, mostly in the United States, and to run in races. So most of the field here has been paid by John Hancock to make the appearance here, and that's what's made it possible to bring the best runners from all around the world together in one place. And it doesn't happen now just at the Olympic Games every 4 years.
The largest fee reportedly going to the Olympic champion, Gelindo Bourdin, some $90,000, but he's not in the picture right now.
He is the first one of the favorites to drop off the pack. We think he's about 100 yards behind, but that's not unusual for his style of running.
Now remember, these are not the male leaders that Christensen is running among. These are some of the back markers among the men.
She is running about 2:18 pace, and New York is a fast course in the early going, but certainly she's got to be thinking, I've been relaxing the last couple of months. I haven't put pressure on myself as she has in really the last 3 or 4 races she won. The press was always talking 2:20 for the marathon, becoming the first woman to run 2:20. She didn't have that pressure here. She said she would try for a course record, but sometimes these things happen when you have the least amount of pressure on you. So she's running out there at 2:18 pace, and maybe, as Catherine said, this will be the magic day for her. Certainly the temperature and the wind and the atmosphere is all perfect for it.
We're trying to give you more wide shots than ever, so you can also have a tour of New York City while you watch the race. This residential area, neighborhood stores, we run through Brooklyn now. Projected finish now 2:18. They've slowed down.
No, that's for the women. That's for Ingrid
Yeah,
right
all right,
there. So her projected finish is 2:18. The men have picked it up. Their projected finish is under 2:07. And once again, the course record here, 2:08.13, set by Alberto Salazar back in 1981.
Okay, Ikonga still leading the race, but right behind him, Mark Nenow of the United States, the man who is marked as perhaps the next great American marathoner. Well, he's looking good up till here. Again, a look at the course. Here's where they are now. These little flashing circles. At mile 10, the total distance, 26 miles, 385 yards. Why do they run such an odd distance? Well, that's the distance from Windsor Castle to the finish line in White City Stadium in London. In the 1908 Olympics, Queen Victoria wanted her grandchildren to watch the start, so they started there. Now, the section that they're in is Williamsburg, populated to a great extent by Hasidic Jews, very religious people, who wear the black coats and the black hats. At the beginning of the New York City Marathon, they were not very receptive to it, as I say, being very religious people. Now, however, some of them actually even give water to the marathoners as they pass by. New York, the ethnic blend of the whole world here. We're number one, eh?
Well, he's number one. He's
you?
number one on the policeman's list. He jumped into the race. He had a number on him. The police just took him out. Now we are coming up to a live shot of the leaders. Yama Ikonga leading. Mark Nenow right there. Ken Martin, the American, in fourth. What a race for them.
Well, they do a lot better with imposters these days than they did in 1972 at Munich in the Olympic Marathon, when one of them ran into the stadium ahead of Frank Shorter and looked like the winner for a while. Fortunately, there was no number 72 in the race when I looked down at my list. And he was wearing that number. There's the projected finish, 2:07.04, so they have slowed down a little bit, not at a world's best pace at the moment.
Oh, there goes Steve Jones on the far left side with number one, the defending champion. Something's going to happen here. Larry, you sense a few people gathering for a move?
Marty, I do. What's been interesting is Juma Ikonga out here has a real disadvantage. He lacks a finishing kick, as we've touched on. He is compelled, like a miler without a great kick, to force the pace. He knows that. Jones has sat in the middle of a group of a dozen athletes and let everybody else break the wind around him. He's been like a Pied Piper himself, monitoring everybody. Jones's head has been looking left and right, just taking stock of everything going on. and right now he's getting poised to sit right behind Ikanga. He pulled up to him so that Juma knows he's right there. We should also add that the Olympic champion, Galindo Bourdin, is about 150 yards behind right now. He is still within striking distance. Remember, at the Olympic Games, he came from behind to win the gold medal. But the rest of the great athletes are right up there, and he now looks very fresh. I think will be a big dark horse and a surprise here, maybe even a medal. But the pace is like nothing I've ever seen in this event before. It has gone from 4:39 to almost 5 minutes a mile. It's varied all over the place. It makes it tough to stay with the lead group. As we are now leaving the Hasidic neighborhood, Jim.
Larry, the conditions are still perfect, no wind out there.
Jim, that's a good point. We have a slight tailwind still as we wend our way over towards Greenpoint. I can see from the flags unfurled up top that they're gently at the athlete's back. It's a slight wind, but it's better to have it there.
Okay, under yet another bridge, leaving Williamsburg. And we'll be moving back to Ingrid Christensen, the leader. Here, Mark Nienow. Where's he?
Well, they're going for a water stop, and Mark has decided not to have any water. You know, it's interesting. He told us that last year in his first marathon, he was concentrating on getting water and all of minutiae, and he said, I had water on the brain. I'm not going to do that this year.
Still standing by at the Juilliard School, Bill Conti and the Juilliard Orchestra. Here's how it strikes them right now.
Automotive sponsor of the New York City Marathon, by John Hancock Financial Services, Real Life, Real Answers, and by Nuprin, the medicine that gives you big pain relief in a little yellow pill, in tablets and caplets. Once again, live from New York, our host, Jim McKay.
All right, a look at the great mass of runners. Bit of news, an American had taken the lead briefly. Ken Martin, he's still in second place behind Ikanga. Well, a little bit earlier we met one of the common men in this race. Now, how about the women? Well, let's take a look at Mary Leslie Ullman. Mary Leslie Ullman is 34 years old, born in Belmont, Massachusetts, lived in New York for some 5 years now. And we'll take a look at her background. Mary Leslie Ullman, her apartment on what is usually referred to as the fashionable Upper East Side of New York. She's single. She runs 50 miles a week, 8 to 10 miles before work every day, gets up at 5:30 to do that, likes to do quilts, what she's doing there. And she works, actually, as a manager of a wholesale and retail sales at an outlet store, Lillian Vernon Stores. She has 4 brothers. 3 of them are also running in the marathon. They're all older than she is. Peter's 42, Michael's 44, Stephen's 46. So 4 members of her family in the marathon, including herself. There she is at work. Now, there was a big pasta party for all the runners last night, but the Ullmans had their own. And there were plenty of them to carbo load for today's great race. Mary Leslie went to Brown University and was the goaltender for the women's ice hockey team. That was the first intercollegiate varsity women's hockey team in the country. And she's out there somewhere. Mary Leslie, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
How you doing?
Pretty good, pretty good.
What does that mean? You feel you're right on? Your pace?
Yeah, it took quite a while to get over the start. I think about 2.5 minutes. So,
What do you mean by that?
well, it took us 2.5 minutes just to get to the balloons, the start line. And then took about a half a mile of walking before you could start picking up the pace.
Do you ever talk to anybody out there? Any runner who's alongside you for a while? Or?
Yeah, my brother Peter is right beside me.
Oh, right there.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. How you going, Peter?
I'm doing just fine.
There are the Ullmans out in the streets of New York. A part of what... I'll tell you, there's a guy right behind the 2 of you. If he finishes, I'll be amazed. Doesn't look...
Well, you know, it's interesting that 90% of the people who start the race do finish it. 20 years ago, it was only about 40%.
Okay, good luck to you, Mr. 16,333. And to the Ullmans, thanks a lot. Now we're in the Greenpoint section of Brooklyn. Greenpoint, some of the Brooklynites call it. Predominantly Polish these days. When Pope John Paul II visited New York, while he was still a Polish cardinal, he visited Greenpoint. And there, the leaders.
Well, now Densimo, number 2, has taken the lead. He is the man who has run the world's fastest time ever in the marathon. Jama Ikanga of Tanzania matching him stride for stride. Number 1, Steve Jones, defending champion. And then Ken Martin, the American.
Ken Martin is blocked by Jones right now. He's got a blue shirt on. You'll see him in a minute. He's right behind Steve Jones.
Then number 8 is Mark Platchis of South Africa, and right American Mark Nenow.
So the lead pack remains pretty much the same. Let's go down to Larry now.
Jim, it's beginning to break up here. The surging is going on. Ikanga is putting his foot down on the accelerator. World-class athletes have to seemingly very comfortable.
Where's Bourdais?
His big forte is second half of the race.
If you So the story really begins to build now and to shape up. There's Ingrid Christensen, still way out in front of the women's race, threading her way through the men's group. So the race goes on pretty much as forecast. Oh, there was one of the volunteers giving water was knocked down. May have hit her head. Well, I'll try to check up on that. Christensen, the women's leader, but she was surrounded by men, and suddenly the volunteer trying to do her job went down.
Well, this is one reason why the men should not stick with the lead woman runner. She can't get the water that she should be able to get as the leader in a race.
Edward, of course, still leading very easily. So many times the leader in this race at this point for the women has been Greta Weitz, another Norwegian woman. She's with Donna at the finish line right now.
Thank you, Jim. And Greta, we've seen you cross this finish line in first 9 times. You didn't get an option for the 10th. How about the pace out there? How much does the weather matter in her early lead? And I bet you wish you'd had weather like this just once here.
Sure, the weather is excellent for running. You couldn't have a better day. And Ingrid runs very well, and she's looking so comfortable. I can't believe it that she can look that comfortable running at this pace.
Do you think she can keep it up? She's on a 2:18 pace right now.
Well, if she can keep the pace, I'm not sure, because this course normally you slow down on the second half, but she will definitely break the course record.
Okay, let's talk about you and your condition. Amenorrhea, which means that you don't have your normal menstrual periods, loss possibly of hormones. You've been taking injections. What's the outlook for you?
Well, my body is in balance now, and I'm recovering from a stress fracture in my pelvic bone, and I started running the 1st of October, and so I'm just looking ahead, getting back there slowly, and hopefully I'll be back next year.
Some people fear with the condition of amenorrhea that can lead to earlier osteoporosis with people, which means a loss of bone tissue. Can you comment on that?
Well, I don't think that will happen if you are treated, medically and go and see a doctor, and so I'm not concerned about that at all.
So we'll see you here for an attempt at the 10th?
Next year, yes.
Okay, now back to you, Jim.
All right, Greta Weitz, 9-time winner of the marathon. Here's Inga Christensen, still easily leading the women's division. The men's division, they've begun to break away from the lead pack. We'll be going over to them. Christensen, however, still on the world's best time pace. There the stand. Christensen, Ivanova, the Soviet Union. Margaret Gross, the United States, still third, followed closely by Laura Fogli of Italy, and Kim Jones of the United States fifth.
Kim Jones just 3 weeks ago won the Twin Cities Marathon. She got in this race because she's planning to run it next year and wanted to see the course, but obviously she feels real good. What's happened in the men's race is that they ran 4 miles in a row at about 4:54 pace, and even though that's very fast, the evenness allowed a big group to get together. Then they threw in a very fast mile. Jama Ikanga and Steve Jones threw in a very fast mile. That broke the pack up, and now as we come back, we see that Ikanga has even opened up a gap on Steve Jones.
Let's take a look at that. Ikanga now with a fairly big lead, the biggest lead of the race so far. But Steve Jones, the defending champion, in second place, and very surprisingly, Ken Martin, the 31-year-old American from New Mexico, in third place. And these three are, ooh, Larry, if you hear me, what are they, a couple hundred yards ahead of everybody else?
Jim, it's been an amazing surge by Ikanga. As Marty was saying, 4:55s was the mile pace. He ran a mile here in the middle of the race in 4 minutes, 34 seconds. And he has actually splayed even second place Steve Jones now by 50 yards. Ikanga is not letting up. The man has been training up to 200 miles a week, I'm told. It's unbelievable how he has crushed the lead group so quickly from mile 13 to 14. This is an amazing pace and effort he's showing out here.
But how far is it from Ken Martin in third place back to the rest of the guys?
No more than 40 yards. Martin is in front. Martin is third, and behind him right now, I'd say now 60 or 70 yards.
Okay. So they're not out of it yet.
Face up is whether Jones chooses to rest also.
Pace of the marathon, picking up. Ikanga taking the lead. Does that inspire the pace of our musicians? Let's find out as we go live again from the Juilliard School.
Once again, Jim McKay and Marty LaCour.
Well, Marty, we've passed the halfway mark, both the men's and the women's, and nothing too ultimately surprising so far, except that Ikanga has really opened up a big lead now.
Well, he's one frustrated man. In his last 3 races, Boston, Tokyo, and Boston again, he was second. So he's doing everything he can to make sure the race doesn't come down to Central Park. It doesn't come down to the last mile. And he's made a big break. He passed the halfway point 30 seconds faster than Steve Jones did last year in Steve Jones's victory. Just off in the distance, though, I think we can see that Ken Martin, the American, has taken second place over from Steve Jones. A quick recap on Steve Martin, who's the 8th best steeplechaser ever in American history. He has run 2:11 for the marathon. Right now he's running 2:07 pace. Not a novice, though. He won the Pittsburgh Marathon twice, so he's running very well. Now, Ingrid, as Greta mentioned, the second part of the course is a little slower, and Ingrid has passed the halfway point in 1 hour and 10 minutes.
Just look at the gap behind the leaders. We saw nobody on the bridge.
No, they have broken it open, but I don't think Ikanga will keep that. Now, Ingrid here has a 2-minute lead on the second woman. Her pace 1:10:20 at halfway, so you double that and it would be 2:20:40 pace. But keep in mind what Greta said earlier, that the second part in Central Park is the slower part of the course. So Ingrid now has to set her sights, if she's running for time, on the course record, maybe around 2:23 or 2:24.
You mentioned that Ikanga had finished second in his last 3 marathons, but the reason he finished second was that he was out-kicked near the end, right?
Well, he knows in Boston a year ago that Abraham Hussein sat right on his shoulder and beat him by 1 second in the last 100 yards. So he told us earlier in the week he's been changing his training a little bit, and he's worked on a way to get rid of everybody. Well, he got rid of them, but I don't think he's gotten rid of them for good.
We'll see.
Don't forget, then Simo, the world record holder, is behind him.
Again, a look at Ikanga. He's going downhill now on the Queensboro Bridge, headed for First Avenue in Manhattan, and that's where the largest crowd usually is gathered. First Avenue is absolutely jammed with people right now. There you see the projected finish. That would be a personal best for him, but not a world's best. Coming down towards First Avenue in Manhattan. There's the crowd waiting for that first runner to come off the bridge. They haven't spotted him yet. But we'll be waiting for him, as will the rest of the crowd. Balloons stretched across the street. Real festive atmosphere in New York. It's not too cold for the spectators. It's not too warm for the runners. Temperature probably 52 degrees now. Just about right for a November day. And here he comes. Listen to them. You can hear somebody just say, "It's Ikanga from Ethiopia." Now he's on First Avenue in Manhattan. It used to be called Yorkville. Now we might call it Yuppieville. The Upper East Side, a lot of singles bars and that sort of thing, at mile 16. Used to be populated mostly by Germans, many Czechs and Hungarians. Now it's Fridays and sushi and Mexican restaurants, if you like Mexican food, and all that sort of thing. Anything you want on First Avenue. Perhaps victory for Ikanga as he follows the long blue line. Is it something of a help to the guy when he finally hears these big crowds as he comes off the bridge?
Well, certainly. You saw his head swivel to both sides. Here's a man who grew up in Tanzania, miles away. He told us since he was in first grade, he ran 7 miles to school and 7 miles back, and if he was late, the teacher would beat him. So sometimes it was like a race to get in there before the bell. Of course, this is a major rush of adrenaline for him to get on there with the big crowds.
Here is Fred Lebo, who's the director of this race, the guiding genius, the spirit behind the New York City Marathon all these years. Born in Transylvania. I never knew anybody before who was born in Transylvania, but he was, which is part of Romania, of course, and does his General Patton-like job, standing up in the convertible all the way. And still, no sign of anybody catching up with Ikonga or Christensen. Still, the story of this marathon, you have to guess, is yet to come, at least in the men's division. Frank Shorter not running here today, remember him? The man who won at Munich after the imposter first came into the stadium. Frank Shorter of Yale. Munich was actually the city where he was born. Father was in the service. We're going to discuss the state of American marathoning briefly here, and there was Shorter winning the Olympics in 1972. What does he think of the state of it?
I don't think there's a lack of interest in distance running. I think there are just as many young runners coming up who would like to win Olympic medals and win major marathons. But I think what has been forgotten is not that you have to really suffer or serve penance or really deprive yourself in order to be a good athlete, but you do have to do certain things. And one of them may just be to move away and live somewhere where you're not particularly comfortable, but you know it's better for you because of the other athletes there. And I think American distance runners aren't lazy. They just seem to want to stay in their hometowns now. And after a certain level, as with a lot of other things, you simply have to leave home in order to get good.
However, so far today, Marty, there's been a surprise. American Marathon is not expected to be up among the leaders, but so far we have 2 Americans in the top 5.
Well, this all ties together. Ken Martin has moved to New Mexico. He now trains at altitude. Mark Nino, who is up there, has been training in the Lake Tahoe area at altitude. But of course, Yama Ikonga was born at altitude, and he has been at Alamosa, Colorado for the last 3 weeks training at altitude, which is really a technique that Frank Shorter was the first one to discover would help you run the marathon better at sea level.
Well, now, Larry, has Ken Martin closed in a bit on Ikonga?
Yes, he has, Jim. This race is not over by any means, although Ikonga looks terrific. There's a wall of people out here. They're in the fire escapes hanging out, about 6 deep overall. It's a very interesting race behind me. 6th place is Denzimo from Ethiopia.
Can you get a...
5th place is Garcia. 4th place is Betio. Steve Jones is in 3rd. And Ken Martin is about 100 yards back. Each one of those people I mentioned are about 100 yards behind each other.
Mark Nino has dropped back out of it then?
Yes, I do not see him. He is at least half a mile back at this point. That's a good point. He fell off very, very quickly. I think back about 9th place, about a half mile back, the Olympic champion Galindo Bourdin when last seen.
Well, now we got a good look at the face of Ikonga. What kind of shape does Ken Martin appear to be in? Can you see?
Yes, he looks very comfortable. It's a great point at a race, at a point in the race like this, to study a person's facial expressions. And I would say he's hurting for the first time here now. He's actually looked very fresh. His stride and his gait, his arm carriage are very good. The guy that seems to be struggling a little bit more is Steve Jones in 3rd place.
Well, now we have a better look at Ken Martin. How's he look to you, Marty?
Well, he certainly looks to be loping a little bit more than he was earlier in the race when his leg turnover was quicker. The guys have to analyze it. Either Ikonga is going to hold this pace and set close to the world's best time, or he's going to come back to them. There's a lot more chance of that happening.
Soon the battle will be joined in the New York City Marathon. Stay with us.
Sponsor of the New York City Marathon. by John Hancock Financial Services. Real life, real answers. By Sharp Electronics. From sharp minds come sharp products. And by Levi's 505 and 506 jeans.
So the orchestra plays on at the Juilliard. The race goes on in the streets of New York. And Juma Ikanga of Tanzania continues to lead, a comfortable lead over Ken Martin of the United States, Inga Christensen of Norway, with a big lead in the women's competition. But if anybody's got a kick, it'll be coming in the next few miles. Ikanga, very comfortable looking, Marty.
Oh, he certainly is running well. But as you said, it's still a tough 3 miles in Central Park where we've seen over the years major changes happen in the race. Don't forget, that's where Rod Dixon caught Jeff Smith just 200 yards from the finish. That's where Pizzolato had to stop 7 times in Central Park. Last year, Bettiol had to lay down and relieve some cramps. So a lot happens in Central Park. Now, Ingrid's running very well here. Her halfway time was 1:10, but that was